Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. My name is Leon Godwin, and in this episode, as always, we are going to dive into the world of AI in the non-profit sector. So, in our AI for Good series, we invite experts in the field in the non-profit sector and get their perspectives on how AI is being adopted, possibly what the challenges are, and what the opportunity space is. This week, we are going to explore the potential of AI with Stuart. So, hi, Stuart. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Fantastic to see you, Leon.
So, I think it's probably best to kick off. And why don't we go with you introducing yourself and a little bit about the work that you do?
Fantastic. Thank you, Leon. Well, it's absolutely great. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm really looking forward to the next 45 minutes, hour or so. I think we'll probably have some really exciting chat here. And for a long time, Leon, I've been a big fan of lots of the stuff you've done. I've listened to other episodes on this, so really looking forward to it. Myself, so I've been a CIO in a couple of big charities. Royal British Legion and Shelter, and I now run a small consultancy that helps charities get value from their digital data and technology. If you think back years ago, IT used to in the world where I used to live many years ago. I'm showing my age here, but IT used to be all about efficiency and improving productivity, perhaps, and it still is, ever more so in the AI age. But there's this thing all around adding value, about enabling your charity, your organization, your team to do things that you couldn't do before. And in my organization, my consultancy at Virtue Chain, we're experts not just about the improving productivity, but we're really about how you can get the right culture to transform your charity, to transform your organization, so that you can get the right partnerships and get that value from technology and data and digital and AI and all of those things together. So as you'll hopefully hear throughout this, I'm really passionate about how charities can really make the most of technology.
That's excellent. Yeah, I am an unashamed advocate for AI used in the right way. So from just thinking about the right way, I think part of it starts almost from a cultural perspective when it comes to AI. And that involves maybe some shifts within the organization in terms of how they manage that change. What's your perspective in terms of that change management piece when it comes to AI adoption?
So it's something that organizations could struggle with. So change management is the thing that fills organizations with fear. I don't know if there's something like something fairly structured and straightforward, like running your month-end accounts or something like that. That generally doesn't fill organizations with fear, or hopefully it shouldn't, because it's very structured. You know what you're doing. However, transformation and change is something which we've all had experiences. It can go well or it can go badly. And quite often it takes an awful lot of organizational effort. But the good news is that organizations have been doing this for years and years and years, ever since they started, whether they started small and got big, or whether they've been around for a long time, as is the case with many charities. They have been through so many changes. They have seen, I've worked for organizations that have been 50 or 100 years old and have seen so much change in their time. So the good news is organizations are used to change. So AI coming along is a big change. There's no question in my mind there. This isn't one of the sort of like little sort of like sideshows thing, something that's not really going to make much of an impact. AI is a really big change, but as long as you keep a clear head and you remember all of the things when you're sitting as a trustee or in an exec team or in a technology or data team, or just generally within the organization, as long as you keep a clear head and remember everything you've learned about change along that journey, all the things you've learned about empowering the people within your organization, about making sure that you've really understood what you're trying to get for your beneficiaries, what you're trying to get for your customers, whatever the end user is, as long as you remember those lessons, really introducing AI is a lot less scary than you might think at first sight.
Yeah, I think about this from like, we didn't traditionally we haven't done a lot of sort of training. If we rolled out Microsoft Word when 365 came out, whilst it's incredibly powerful, we didn't have to examine that user's context, like their individual role. We were giving them a suite of productivity applications, we provide some guidance and what have you, but we weren't looking at it in the perspective of their individual roles. Whereas I think with AI, we do need to look at what they're doing, how they're doing it, and is there an opportunity to do things better. So I agree with you. I think it is different. This is why I don't see AI as an IT project. I think it's a business project, and that change, I think, and that change management, I think it comes down from the top. One of the other things, sort of anecdotal things I've experienced when it comes to AI is I love working with the non-profit sector because they are simultaneously the most open and probably some of the most ambitious sectors when it comes to the adoption of AI, but simultaneously the most nervous and cautious. And hopefully people like yourselves and episodes like this helps provide that foundation when it comes to that change and that business change to overcome some of that caution.
So Liam, can I pick up on something you said there, which I think
Sure.
is really reassuring? So you said the most ambitious, but also the most cautious. For me, when I hear that, that makes me feel quite happy, because actually that's exactly what you want charities to be. You want that charities are fulfilling the most important message, missions in the world. You want them to be the most ambitious. You don't want the most ambitious company in the world to be the one that's selling cars or working in another industry. You want the organizations that are trying to change the world, that are trying to help vulnerable people or vulnerable individuals in difficult situations. They're the ones who want to be really ambitious. So tick, if you think charities are being really ambitious with AI, that is absolutely fantastic. But also those vulnerable people we're working with, my God, you don't want to get it wrong, because the consequences of getting things wrong when you're dealing with individuals who are in difficult situations are so bad. And that's why we have these multiple layers within charities to try and put safeguards in place to stop that happening. So if you also think they're being quite cautious and risk averse, again, tick, I'm very pleased to hear that.
Yeah, I think one of the other advantages that charities have versus those that might have to service a shareholder is the sort of competitive intelligence that would exist with a private company, insurance, banking industry, means their ability to collaborate with others within their sectors is limited. Whereas I see that as actually being the non-profit superpower, because actually if they're going to adopt a change, they aren't necessarily competing with another non-profit. They can actually share their knowledge and experience, and that sort of more open-minded, collaborative approach, which is where that change management can come in. If there are lessons to be learned from those that have already been on the journey, I think non-profits are much more ready to go and share their experience with others within their sectors than maybe those that are servicing a shareholder. What's your thoughts on that?
So I think that's completely right. So I'm going to give an example now. So if we think of commercial organizations with shareholders who are using AI. Now let's so if we were to pick two retail organizations, two large shops, I'm not going to say which ones, but let's just pick two random large shops who are in competition with each other to sell their goods, and both of them are looking at AI. And perhaps they're looking at AI to help understand their customers better, to help understand how they can manage to get people to buy more things. Now, my God, they're obviously in competition. They're going to be plowing as much money as they can into AI and really want to get their approach right, so as they can outperform their competitor and retain their market share. Now, if you flip to the charity sector here, we've got that huge advantage that if we're looking at how have we taken advantage of AI, what have we done? We're not in competition with each other at all, because there's no element of Well, if it's not a zero-sum game. If one charity suddenly starts making being able to create lots of income through fundraising, that isn't generally at the expense of another charity, because people have different things that they associate with different areas. And so regardless how you look at AI, whether it's to do with helping beneficiaries, whether it's to do with productivity, whether it's to do with fundraising, whether it's to do with your internal processes, all of those things are not in competition between charities. As I say, fundraising is the only one, and really that's not really in competition. So it is the perfect opportunity for charities to reflect and understand where they've had successes with their AI implementations, where they've actually understood that they're seeing those productivity gains, or where they're understanding that they're managing to get their staff engaged better. That's the ideal opportunity to share it. And I know so much that happens within the charity sector, which is a really great thing, and why it's such a great sector to work in.
Yeah, I agree. I think in a previous life, I worked for a larger SI, and as one of the things I discovered was the sort of change as we went through the sort of noughties and the onesies, is people would tender for some kind of service, but when it came to local governments, they were a relatively small fish in quite a large pond, and what I started seeing happening in that space was multiple councils joining up together to create a bid, because functionally they have a lot of commonality in the services that they provide. And I think if we look at the business processes in the non-profit, every non-profit's got a bill to pay, which means everyone processes invoice. There is an onboarding and offboarding of staff. There are core processes that are common, and I would love to see a sort of shared AI council between non-profits that can collectively understand how they can deliver change collectively across the organizations.
But Leon, sorry, every time you say it, I feel I have to respond. So yes, I would say I would also love to see something like that. However, I would also say that getting charities to collaborate is really, really difficult. Whether you need specific things. There's been a variety of different attempts over the years. I've been involved in quite a few, and getting alignment between the goals of the charities and getting them to collaborate on specific pieces of work is really, really difficult. I'll tell you, it's something that someone said to me a long time ago. We were talking all about the effort that had gone into CRMs across the charity sector. This is slightly tangential. It's not about AI, but it's a good example. And they were saying, if you could look at the amount of money that the charity sector has spent on CRM implementations over a 10-year period, it is really quite jaw-dropping. And you think of all of that donor money that's gone into that, and it's given benefits, no question, it's given benefits, but the same problems have been solved over and over again in different charities, and the opportunities for learning between those charities would have been immense. And this person I was talking to was a major donor for one of the charities I was working for, and they said to me, wouldn't it be great if say, I don't know, 5 years ago or something like that, we'd just gone along and taken a large chunk of money, let's say £50 million or something like that, and gone and worked with a big consultancy to say, let's try and understand the problems of the sector as a whole. Let's try and build out some sort of template for how the charities can deliver CRM. Let's try and work that through, and then be able to give that, rather than the major donor giving individual chunks of money to different charities. Let's say let's just pool a fund, deliver that for the entire charity sector. Boy, would that have made a big difference in the world of CRM. I would say in the world of AI, we are at that pivot moment at the moment. So if you could, for example, get a group of major donors together who are prepared to put in some money to say, we're going to really turbocharge the UK charity sector with AI by coming up with some common frameworks, driving that collaboration, I think that could be transformational, not at a charity level, but at an ecosystem level.
Yeah, and I think I will explore ecosystems with you a little bit later on. One of the things that the way you're describing, you were referring to sort of beneficiaries earlier on, and I was thinking about the nature of a non-profit is about, I have an expertise, I have access to knowledge and resources that those beneficiaries can trust. And with the advent of AI, how can they adopt AI whilst retaining that trust? Do you have a perspective on that?
I think trust is so important. When you look at the surveys of who do the British public trust, when you look through different types of organisations or different types of career, and you look at things like newspapers, politicians, various different places they get their information from, social media, charities always are fairly high on that list. Which is a great place, and I think that's where we need to try and really do everything we can to keep that trust right at the top. And there is a challenge with AI, that mistakes there could erode that trust. Mistakes, if you did get charities rushing headlong into using AI to answer all of the queries that their charity around what the charity is doing, and there were lots and lots of cases of mistakes, or even some big high profile ones, that trust would be eroded. So we really need to be careful about that. However, there is a burning platform here, which there aren't many burning platforms around charities and AI, I don't think, but there is one here that I've seen, that more and more information is coming out through AI and through other sources, which is meaning that people are going to charities' websites a lot less. We've seen, I've spoken to many charities where they have seen that the visitors to their website dropping. And if you're a charity that disseminates knowledge, whether it's around animals or homelessness or drug and alcohol abuse or whatever it is around health, you have some really good knowledge that you've built up over many years that is informed by experts and that people can really trust. And they know if they go to a particular charity that's well known in their area, that information is going to be accurate, and the charity prides itself on the accuracy there. But increasingly what happens is, if you type in your problem into Google, Google will give you an AI overview on that. And that AI overview, it says at the bottom, may or may not be correct because it has been generated by AI. But there's two problems there. Number one is the accuracy of the information. It doesn't have that human oversight, that trusted oversight their charity can give. But number two, it's also meaning that quite often people don't actually then go through to the charity website to get the further information. They just skim through, read through the quick one, and then they skip going on to that. And so there's a real challenge there that charities need to step up and make sure they're really getting their message out about why it is important that you get trusted information that you can rely on, and the unique selling point that they have, that they really have invested a lot of time in making sure that that knowledge is accurate, whether it is AI assisted knowledge or just purely developed by the internal staff within the organization. Trying to get that right is so important.
Yeah, I agree with human oversight. I think that the problem is twofold. I mean, the Google example is interesting because they are servicing they may be surfacing a response because maybe there's an audience or someone who's paid for their AdWords, which means that the reference material that surfaced is from someone who's paying Google the money, but it isn't necessarily on point with the information. So you inherently, in that commercial model, have bias built in. I have seen, I think we've all heard the stories around AI, the hallucination and making things up, which we wouldn't want. Although I will say that is somewhat exaggerated because it's normally born out of a lack of expertise of how you actually tune those things out. So there is a creativity component, and literally there's a dial that you can turn on these AI models. So when you choose ChatGPT, it's programmed to be 70% creative. And lying is a function of creativity. So it has that. Whereas if you were, so we worked with an organization that the task was reducing the number of deaths on roads. So the information that they give is clearly really important. that they are relaying accurate information, because there is a risk to life component, and having the ability to analyze what a response is going to be for its faithfulness and accuracy prior to releasing that, I think is particularly important. So I think there is a technical component. I did see one non-profit. They used AI. It was actually a Microsoft story. Microsoft got some very good web, some sort of stories around sort of AI adoption. And this particular organisation, UK-based organisation, they facilitate accommodation for carers in certain circumstances, but they're relatively small and they have a finite amount of capacity to deal with load. They built and trained and utilised an AI to accelerate and give information more readily when they didn't have the capacity to be able to meet the demand. So I think I agree with you. Trust is incredibly important, which means when you implement it, you have to do it in a way that is faithful and productive and accurate. Because trust, I think, is incredibly important. So I think I'm on the same page with you there. I think it is something we need to address, and there are mechanisms and processes that can do that. There's also, one of my advices I would give to organizations is, before you do external facing AI adoption type activities, use them internally. Build up that level of knowledge, that AI literacy within your organization, what it's good at, what it's not good at, when's the right time to use it, when's not, rather than just going out and buying something shiny that may or may not erode trust.
So something else I'd add to that, Leon, which is quite difficult, is that AI really is changing quite rapidly. So we're recording this is going out on 10th of July today, and I've normally, when I do things like this, I talk about something and I can rely on something from, I don't know, 6 months or a year ago and know that it's probably predominantly still the case. With AI, I'm finding that things are changing very rapidly. And so, for example, when we talk about that information may or may not be accurate, you talk about the hallucinations. These are all things which are changing quite quickly. AI is definitely a bit, there's no question in my head that the outputs you get from AI, what it's capable of, is changing month by month, and it is getting better. And so the temptation in chats like this is to talk about things that you've seen 6 months ago or 3 months ago, or things that are happening now. But then the challenge is that, if someone's watching this in 3 months or 6 mons, what you're saying is well, the one thing you have to be really careful of is this and this and this. This may well have changed in 3 months or 6 months. So it's a very fast changing landscape.
Oh, indeed. I mean, I work part-time, and keeping up with the knowledge is a full-time job. So I end up spending a lot of my personal time absorbing a lot of information to stay current in terms of, the capabilities of these models and the benchmarks that's used to, it's suggested that that the next model that comes out from OpenAI will be, there will only be 50 coders on the planet who would be superior to this model at coding. I mean, that's an incredibly high standard. And of course, the other thing is, one of the things we forget is, if today it's probably around the ranked about 500th in the world in terms of expertise in coding. But just think about that for a second when we're talking about, if you have a ranking system, you're better, you're worse. Don't we have the same thing with human beings, your ability to make mistakes or not make mistakes? And how do we manage that with human beings? Why wouldn't we adopt the same sort of processes when it comes to AI adoption, to ensure that they are improved and they are better and they are accurate, and that you minimize error? So one of the things I failed to do at the top of the call was to mention to the audience, if you are interested in asking any questions, please do so. And I've just noticed one question has come in, which we might as well tackle now. But if you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat, and we will certainly get to those. So this is I like this question that's come in, because it's actually a question that I have a personal perspective on this. But I'd be interested in your perspective, Stuart. So what do we feel about the term digital transformation, which is often used to describe AI projects? And they would argue that instead of digital transformation, it should be organizational transformation. What's your perspective on the use of that term?
I think we've got very caught up in language and the impression that the language gives over the last, well, in my time, in my career, the amount of times I've said to people, this isn't an IT project, as you said earlier, that AI isn't an IT project. Really what I've been saying when I say this isn't an IT project is that actually, do you know, that you have to have the people who are using the technology involved in the development of the solution. You can't just have some people sitting in a basement coding it. So when we talk about digital transformation, I'm going to be fairly blasé about this, but there's been a variety of words that have come along and come and gone before we've had AI, and digital is one of them, where it's had all sorts of different meanings. And I remember the amount of times that I've sat in a board meeting or something like that, and we said we're here to talk about digital, and then we spent the first 20 minutes trying to get a common definition of what we mean by digital. And each 6 months that passed, it was almost like we'd reached a new level of understanding, that we were able to better define that what we meant by it. But it was actually just that times were changing. So when we talk about digital transformation, yes, I mean, it is organizational transformation, but it is regardless how you talk about it, it's about using that combination of digital, working with your customers. It's about using your data, understanding your data. It's about using the technology behind it. It's about using AI. It's about making sure you've got the right culture. It's make sure you're working with the users, whether that's the people within your organization or more broadly the people you're trying to help. It's the whole combination of these things. So I realize that terms, language takes people in the wrong direction. I wouldn't get too hung up on it if it was my take on it.
I would echo that. I think it is a term that comes with a bit of baggage. I can remember back in the day, I think one of the worst sort of marketing decision was to refer to public cloud as public cloud. Inherently, it makes it feel like all your data is going to be public. And I think you have those back in the sort of noughties and onesies. You have these really large monolithic digital transformations that be done by some huge consultancy firm, where they pay inordinate amounts of money to not necessarily deliver anything that was actually that successful. So I think the sort of failure rates, I think it's got a bit of baggage to it, but I think it's more, I agree with you, you shouldn't get hung up on the terminology. It's more about the mindset that this is about an evolution of technology, and we need to approach it in an evolved way rather than the way that we used to do it before.
Can I just add to that, because it reminds me of a story. So many years ago, I remember sitting down with a chief exec, and we were talking about a technology problem within the organization that we were trying to solve. And the more we talked about it, the bigger the problem got. And I remember that there was that moment when the chief exec said, right, what we need to do is we need to go and talk to the board. We need an organization-wide digital transformation program. We need to complete a huge digital transformation program. Those programs at the time were very widely, it was a widely used term, and it was before the term started getting the baggage. And I remember saying to him, I said, so we started here from one very specific problem that we wanted to solve, to now we want to digitally transform the organization. If you ask me about this one very specific problem that you want to solve, I feel I can quite confidently say we can run a short, agile project which will solve this. If we talk about a broad digital transformation, you will want to follow a very waterfall approach, which will be to fully define everything to do with that problem, to understand all the things that are wrong with the organization. And then once we've brought in all the stakeholders, and we've had many months of doing that, we can then move on to trying to understand what the solutions are. And then maybe 3 years from now or something like that, you'll be able to go, in the best possible, the 1% scenario, you'll be able to pull off the curtain and say, ta-da, we have digitally transformed, and everyone will pat ourselves on the back and we'll have a glass of champagne. But in 99% of other scenarios, what will have happened is everyone will be unhappy. We will have used up an awful lot of organizational time and money and effort, and we won't have anything to solve. The alternate scenario, solve this specific problem that we have here, and 3 months from now, we will start to see the benefit.
I really like that as an anecdote, because I think AI is very similar. I think, you need to think, there are some things that you need to consider. You just don't rush out and go and turn on a license and go and buy it. But at the same time, it doesn't, going at it and saying, I am going to view this entirely holistically as a huge digital transformation project, probably misses the point. I mean, let's take the case of users. How can AI empower a user to perform their role more effectively? I mean, what's your perspective on that user's perspective? And then we'll probably bring it back to that broader kind of monolithic approach, or how it doesn't need to be.
So how can AI? So I'd say I'd go back in time. So because I always try and ground everything I'm thinking about in the lessons we've learned. How can technology empower a user to perform their role more successfully? Way back, let's see if this analogy works. I'm working in a finance team, and someone gives me a calculator. Does that enable me to perform? This is probably a fair bit a long time ago. Does that enable me to perform my role more effectively? Yes, it does, because instead of writing down all those numbers, I can then use the calculator to add the numbers together. If you then fast forward to the world of how can individuals then what can we take from that, and how can individuals within an organization use AI more effectively? Well, the answer is they have to learn how to use that calculator. There's no use just giving someone a calculator and then they decide, well, I'm just going to go off and experiment, and what can I do? Oh, I know what I can do. I can write some funny numbers on the calculator, turn it upside down, and it writes out a silly word, which is what we did at school.
I was going to say.
And there's a lot of analogies there with AI and using it to create silly pictures, and to using it to the amount of LinkedIn memes that we've had there that people have used AI for, where we're using an amazing technology for basically the same as writing rude words upside down on a calculator. But jumping back to that question there, so what I'm saying is it's about giving people the knowledge so as they can understand and apply it to their own role. So if you work in a procurement team, what you do is very different to if you work in an IT team, and that's very different to if you work in a finance team. And I've picked off the easiest ones within corporate services there, because they're the easiest ones to get that value. But it's again different to what you do if you're in a fundraising team, or if what you're doing within marketing, or within the beneficiary-led bit of your organization. But understanding what the application of AI can enable you to do there is really, really important through training. And I would say that the best place to start is always the productivity angle, because that's the easier one, because that's the one that we're comfortable with. And it's where I started at the start of this broadcast, where we talked about technology is a combination of productivity and adding value. But the productivity side of things, already with AI, I've seen the statistics to show that you can. The jury is no longer out on, is AI a productivity tool that works. I've seen enough data now that says you give it to a large group of people, you show them how it works, and you will see productivity gains there. And so that's a great place to start, because that enables employees to get to understand it better, in the same way as if they're using the calculator, they start adding up those numbers, they get to understand all the different buttons, what they do, they get to maybe understand about, I don't know, using the memory plus button or something, which might be an advanced feature, but they get to understand all the different things that it can do. And with AI, it's exactly the same. If you're trying to get productivity, everyone who sits in their job and they've got the tedious thing they're doing, they think, do you know, I could do this a bit better if I was doing this, or this would work so much better. And if you give them the tool to start doing that, they'll learn about it, and they'll try and do more things, and they'll experiment, and they'll learn how to be more productive. And all of that learning will then mean, when they're thinking about how can I add value to what my organization's doing? How, when we're developing our new strategy, which is going to be our AI enabled organization wide strategy, how can I help the organization add value to its overall cause? If you've built up that knowledge over time in your employees, then that's how you're going to actually see that value added at a strategy level.
Yeah, extremely well put. I completely agree, and I think I think that has to be measurable. I think it needs to be objective, not subjective. So, what's your view on actually being able to measure the success and benefit, whether it be to an individual or to an organization, when it comes to AI adoption? There's terms like KPIs, ROIs. What's your sort of perspective on that for organizations looking to adopt AI?
I've got a lot of thoughts on that. I've spent a lot of time in my career writing business cases, and I've seen good business cases and I've seen bad business cases. And a good business case has got a really clear focus on, well, at the most simple level, it explains in true terms what the actual cost will be, and it explains in true terms what the actual benefits will be. And it's always hard at the start. This is the challenge with all technology, to try and look forward and guess what the benefits are going to be, because you're nervous to write them down, because you think, okay, this is the things I'm going to be held to for the next year or 2 or 3, and if they don't add up, people are going to describe the project as a failure. But something else I've noticed is that charities and not-for-profits are not very good at monitoring and tracking the benefits from their projects. When they put a project in place, you get to the output stage, the end of the project, and everyone's like, fantastic, great, we got through it, it was on time, it was on budget. But the actual measuring those benefits for the following 2 or 3 years, the simple idea of, well, what do we do with them? Do we have some overall organizational governance board that keeps an eye on these metrics we put in place, or do we keep the project board going that keeps an eye on it? Even those sorts of things are quite difficult. But I think for something new that you're introducing, like productivity AI, it is so important that you put in place those metrics, because you want to prove to yourself that you are actually getting value for money. So you don't just, charities go through hard times and good times, and sometimes when there's hard times, you go through you have that point when the chief finance officer is sitting down with you and saying, okay, we need to cut 10% out of your budget. And as if you're the technology digital person, you're like, well, we can't, because it's all important. What do you want to cut in the organization? And you really need to reassure yourself that that spend you're spending on AI, your recurring your recurring monthly spend, is giving you value for money. So you can say, so if the chief finance officer comes along and said, listen, I don't know, this £100,000 a year we spend on AI related products, can we cut that in half, actually? Because you need to be able to say, well, look, you can cut it in half, but you're just going to see your costs bouncing up over there. And so you need to reassure yourself. But what can you do in terms of those metrics? How can you deliver those productivity metrics? I think that's a really important thing to look at. But the great news is that there's all sorts of smarter people who've already done this. And so you don't need to make up these productivity metrics yourself. There are big organizations, there's government, there's a variety of people all around the world who've introduced AI tools into their organization and really wanted to understand, it's a new technology, is it worth doing? Well, let's put in place these metrics, let's track them over a period of time, and let's understand if it's giving us value for money. That's been done time and time again now. If you asked me a year ago, I could say there's not many examples. Now there's definitely, in the last 12 months, there's been lots of examples. So what I'd recommend is just copying what other organizations have done. Look out there, see the metrics they've used, look at their KPIs all around productivity, and then just copy them and just say, let's try and apply those to this organization, and do it in an agile way as well. Do it in a small way, because if you go bold and say, look, we're just going to buy licenses for everyone in the whole organization, whether it's Copilot, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever platform you're choosing, you're going to have to put together a huge business case, which is going to be quite difficult. It's much simpler to say, let's look at the teams where we think there's most likely to be value. Let's get them some licenses. Let's prove it's working with them over a 3-month period, and then let's expand from there, build the knowledge incrementally.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think going big from the beginning is a mistake some organizations make. Effectively, it's a concept. What will AI do in my business? Prove that concept. And do it within that user's context. I completely agree. I think there are large, especially the early adoption phases, and completely on board with that. There are maybe, some of the back end AI, those that are doing medical research that's maybe not being touched by every member of your organization. It's more of a core nucleus, but delivers extreme value. Something that's very mission focused in its use, as opposed to just accelerating a user's productivity. So I think there's different ways of coming at it. But you did mention business cases, and you came for some examples of pull-in KPIs that are being used elsewhere. Are there any other strategies when it comes to putting together a business case that the audience might appreciate hearing?
Well, so I'll go back to what I was talking about piloting and agile. The business case that's written without any evidence to back it up is a rubbish business case. Let's think of something like let's go to Dragon's Den here. So imagine you go on to Dragon's Den, and you've got your great new product which you want to pitch to them, and they say, okay, so can you tell me how many of these products have you sold so far, and what sort of people buy them? And you're like, oh, haven't actually sold any yet. It's a really great product, but haven't sold anyone, so I don't know who would buy it. And they're gonna laugh in your face and gonna say, listen, it seems a great product, but we want to see a bit more evidence. And so with business cases, exactly the same. Don't just go in with your big business case that has no grounding research and evidence in there, because it's really just built on a pile of sand. What you need to do is you need to be piloting and trialing things first, where you've got the small business case. You want to be, I don't know, I really don't understand why charities have not succeeded more with agile. Let's just spend £5,000. Let's prove that the £5,000 is a good return on investment, and let's do that before we go with the £50,000 or the £500,000 business case. Build up like that. And that's the reason people don't want to do that, of course, is because, well, no, it's really important. It's really urgent. AI is a burning platform. We need to get AI as fast as possible. Well, it's going to be a quicker route to doing it if, rather than spending months and months and months trying to make a really difficult big decision, you instead spend that time making lots of small decisions, because you'll make them so much easier and they're more likely to be the right decisions.
Yeah, it's funny. And Dan Knott, who heads up our data and AI practice, came up with a line the other day, which I thought, because a lot of organizations I speak to, they want the cheat code that gets them to the end. They can skip a load of stuff. They just give me the great thing at the end. All the other steps, I don't care about that. And I do like that sort of phraseology, and I have witnessed it myself. There is that perception that I can just go, and it's the buy versus build almost mentality. It's like, I'll just go and I'll have one AI, please, and check Amazon checkout. It's not as simple as that. So I'm going to do one last question with you, but I've noticed we're having lots of questions come in from the audience, so please feel free to add more of your questions, and we'll go and address those together, if that's okay. But one last question for you, which is more, we've looked at sort of AI and we've discussed its sort of impact at an organizational level. What do you see more broadly from an ecosystem perspective from AI?
So from an ecosystem perspective, I think it's really exciting, because there is a broad challenge that we can meet, and this is back to the question earlier, or what we talked about joining together earlier, and I think there's another question there in the chat about this. I think if we can solve problems that are not just about individual charities, but they're solving the problems at that broader level, there is so much potential for change there. And I love the word ecosystem because it talks it correctly identifies what everyone in the front end service of our charities knows, that an individual is not simply a someone who uses your charity. An individual has generally got an interaction with a broad range of different organizations within an ecosystem. So if you have a particular problem, you're never just going to go to one charity and just say, here's my problem, can you solve it? Generally, you're looking at the internet. Maybe you've got 2 or 3 charities. Maybe you're talking to friends and family. Maybe you're looking to some local organizations. There's a broad set of things which are solving your problems, and those things are quite often not lined up. They're quite often completely incongruent with each other, with one pulling in one direction, one having an emphasis in another direction. The opportunity with AI that really can bring these things together in a way that no other technology could is that it can really personalize that experience for the person you are trying to help within that ecosystem. But it's a challenge that each individual charity will not solve on its own. There's got to be a way that charities are starting to think, and I know from the many chief execs I've chatted to, they think at the ecosystem level, they really do, and they want to solve the problems at that level. But what happens when you get down within the charities is you have a whole load of functional specific teams and departments and directorates which are all trying to solve the problems specifically of that charity. And so the big challenge here I have is that chief execs, trustees, leadership teams can really take a bold approach to leading on AI and realizing this isn't the job of the CIO, the CTO, the CDIO. This is the job of the chief exec, of the chair, of the trustees to really take that lead on AI. That is when that ecosystem change will start happening, when the trustees, who are often trustees of different organizations, get chatting together and they start saying, can we solve these problems together? But it will only happen if you have those leadership teams, the trustees, really owning the whole AI change and saying, look, we realize the potential here. We will lead that change at an ecosystem level.
That's I think that's, yeah, I agree. And actually it sort of dovetails quite nicely into a question that we've got from the audience, where so this particular person is shortly joining a non-profit who's tasked with championing and boosting the adoption of AI. Wonderful. And they're talking and they're asking about the sort of thing I mentioned earlier on about bridging the gaps and cross collaboration between non-profits. Do you have any specific actionable sort of steps that they might take to achieve that? I have one.
So I would focus on problems, not solutions. So I'd say, okay, what is the problem you're trying to solve, and try and understand if the problem you're trying to solve is the same problem as someone else. Because if you're all trying to solve different problems, you're gonna never get to a solution. And so, number one, don't even start on any of that cross-charity collaboration until you can satisfy yourself that if we all wrote down on a post-it note what the problem is, we all have broadly similar post-it notes. But the other thing is around taking smaller steps. There's an awful lot of good organizations out there that can help charities collaborate and they can start those conversations. I think on the first one in the series, you had Tree Hall from Charity IT Leaders, and Charity IT Leaders is a fantastic organization that brings together organizations and enables those conversations to start happening in a formal and informal way through WhatsApp groups, through a variety of ways. So really great to get that cross collaboration going, and you can share knowledge. And as we said, charities are not competing, so there's a lot more openness than in the private sector. So I think that would be my general advice. Identify your problem, make sure it's a common problem, and then be very open about the problem. You say, here is our problem, who has this same exact problem?
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that that I can do to help facilitate that is I offer free of charge workshops where you bring your context. And so, as you rightly said, start with the problem, But so before you'd come to a workshop with me to go and explore that in a bit more detail, you need to know what your problem is. So think about what is the opportunity space for you. But that would be the sort of second step. What are you trying to solve? And then when you have those and you have those workshops, and I do many of these workshops, then, as you say, Tree, we love Tree here. She would be a fantastic facilitator in terms of having that visibility around who else has got the same problems, bringing them together. So, whilst you think about your business, your problems, you can bring them to me. I'll do a workshop with you. We can flesh that out, and then you can then look to network with relevant organizations to see if there is an opportunity for cross collaboration. And I would be amazed if there isn't. We have another question here. Oh, they are coming in. The idea of charities or major donors clubbing together to solve similar AI or CRM issues is often discussed, but as Stuart rightly says, incredibly hard to meaningfully take forward. What are the main reasons for it being so hard, and how to tackle them?
So internally within a charity, if you think of a difficult change project, so you can start from the simple one, I don't know, a project that's just about technology and really has very little end user involvement. I think every tech team out there will go, tick, yeah, we can do that one. I don't know, rolling out the new web filtering system or something like that. That's quite straightforward. Then if you add in if you add in stakeholders who've got lots of user interaction, it gets a stage more difficult. If you then add in multiple departments that need to do it, so you're trying to create some sort of organizational wide change, and that organizational change involves lots of different people who do things in different ways, it becomes just that one stage harder, and that's a very difficult project in a charity. If you then broaden it out to the whole charity sector, or even just organizations within your area, where every charity has a different angle on a similar problem, a specialism. I don't know, so in the world of homelessness, for example, there'll be it's a wide range of different solutions that charities provide. They all sit in different places. Luckily, there's not charities that sit there and do the same thing and overlap, because the Charity Commission is quite good at trying to prevent that happening. But there isn't that overlap. But they all have a different angle on the same problem. And that's the reason it's so hard, is because every organization has a different angle on problems, and you've got all these different groups trying to work together. What I just said before about leading it from right from the top, from the trustee level, that's one of the pointers to success. I was involved in a project with military charities a few years ago, where we were trying to give a joined up beneficiary experience, and the challenges when you have lots of different charities that all do things in different ways, and trying to get to that commonality there, when the charities themselves have got very, very busy day jobs. This is a theme that runs through all of this, by the way, and relates to AI as well. Every charity out there is incredibly busy. Charities don't have lots of spare time people just sitting around. Maybe if you read some newspapers, you might have one impression of charities, but all of us who work in them know that charities have been through infinite loops of trying to make themselves more efficient and trying to make themselves really hone to their what they're doing. And so people are constantly busy on the tasks they're doing. There's not spare capacity to go off and do this big change project, and you need time and money to actually get them to succeed. It's the same with the reason why I just wanted to relate it to AI there. Huge change coming with AI. Charities have already got a completely full in trade. They've got tons of other stuff. They're kind of like, we don't have time for this AI. We've just heard from Leon, he's got a part-time job trying to keep up to date with what's going on in the AI world, but that's a full-time job. We have no one to have that full-time job within our charity, where it's changing every 3 months. Charities are so busy with all the things they're doing because they're doing vital work with not enough money to do that vital work, and so trying to free up the time for these things is really difficult, but it's absolutely essential if we're gonna see some change here.
Yeah, I agree. I think organizations, like engaging with organizations like yours, and like with Tree, with charity IT leaders, or myself, having those people, you spend your life understanding technology and how it can deliver benefit. You are effectively part of that filtering mechanism that filters out the noise and distills it into what's having value. And I think that's important. And that actually also leads into a mindset question that's come in. So what's the biggest mindset shift that non-profits need to embrace to stay relevant and to innovate?
So first of all, I will say I'm not an expert on this. So this is at an organization-wide level. What do they need to do to stay relevant and innovative? And I do. One of the things I do is I talk to boards, I talk to exec teams to try and understand from a technology point of view how they can make technology work. And I can see within the technology, I'll tell you from a technology space, there's a really simple one, which I've seen the embracing agile solutions. It sounds so boring and straightforward, but really there's a long way still to go with this. Embracing an agile mindset, which is so simple, and we've been talking about it for 15 years, but the governance structure set up approach to risk within charities somehow means that going through a series of governance steps involving, as we said, business cases and those waterfall steps is just built into charities. So being more able to experiment and take some risks, I think, is the biggest mindset shift. I think one of the things, just as I shifted, so I run a small consultancy now, and it's a very different world to when I was a CTO, CIO of an organization. Because as a CTO of an organization, you're all about, you want to manage risk really effectively, and you don't want to take big risks because the benefits are generally not outweighed by those risks because the risks are so big. When you're a small organization, you want to take the risk because you want to grow and you want to expand and you want to be able to improve the impact you're having. And charities somehow need to get back to that improving impact and being able to manage their risk in better ways.
Yeah, I think I'm very pro the experimentation side of things. I think if AI is something you want to adopt, so for example, within Cloud Direct, I sit on the AI Cloud Center of Excellence, and our job is to empower people. But some of that involves me and others having the ability to experiment in a safe way to understand, okay, I need to be empathetic to the nature of that person's role. What capabilities and technologies are actually going to have a meaningful change? I will experiment with that. The Cloud Center of Excellence will experiment with that, and we will then invite people and bring them in on the journey. So experimentation, agile, I completely agree with. It's have those people whose mission it is to say, I need to evaluate this, I need to evaluate this approach, and then I need to champion its use if appropriate. I'm just conscious of time, so I think we probably can just squeeze one more in. So what's something non-profits are scared to admit, but they may need to in order to truly innovate? That's an interesting question.
A very elegant question to finish on, which I really like. And I'm going to be slightly controversial with the answer. I think what they're scared to admit is it's about what the strategy for growth for a charity is. I've spent a lot of time in charities where we've looked at large numbers of staff who deliver a particular service, and there's constantly been this idea about how can we grow, how can we deliver this service to more people, because we have so many people or beneficiaries who need to benefit from our services. How can we do this? We now have potentially an opportunity for AI being that strategy for growth for organizations, because it will enable organizations to serve more people more effectively without spending lots of money on extra staff. And so what they are scared to admit, but need to truly innovate, is that they need to embrace technology and embrace the change and understand that it's not necessarily going to result in massive staff cuts. It's going to instead involve them being able to massively scale what the impact they have is.
Thank you very much, Stuart. So I think we're probably at the top of the hour now. So I'd like to say thank you very much to you. I'd like to say thank you very much to the audience. We will continue to be releasing podcasts. If anyone is interested in learning more about Stuart, I'm sure they can go to the virtuechain.co.uk to find a little bit more about what you guys do. So thank you very much, Stuart, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Leon. It's been fantastic. I've loved this. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. It's been fabulous. So thank you to the audience. Thank you for insightful questions, and I will see you on the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.